What do you think of when I say the word remake? Is it money well spent bothering to animate a live-action Lion King? How about a Ghostbusters reboot with a cast of brilliant ladies tragically wasted on a mediocre script? Does it sound like something you'd think you'd want? Maybe at first, but knowing the outcome, you'd probably pass. No thank you, Michael Bay. Please don't ruin the Ninja Turtles for everyone. There's a reason the idea makes you uneasy. The sad fact of the matter is, a remake usually involves cashing in on a good idea for fan service and sparing every possible expense along the way to maximize profits. Ultimately, what you end up with is disappointing and unsatisfying. Warner Brothers has been scamming DC fans out of their box office money for years. Enough is enough. All that wasted potential. Such a shame. Just imagine if the remake actually managed to stick the landing. Too bad that's never gonna happen. Well, they did it. They nailed it. I gotta hand it to Square Enix. They might not know how to make a sequel, but boy golly can they ever handle a remake, let me tell you. This game is amazing. I'd even go so far as to say it almost completely invalidates the original. I know that sounds harsh, but sometimes the truth hurts, and the truth is, next to the remake, the original looks kinda bad. Maybe it was great in the 90s, and don't get me wrong, it was. But the problem is that Final Fantasy VII aged about as well as a bag of milk. Look at a game like Ocarina of Time, for example. Both were revolutionary at the time, and both are internationally renowned as some of the best games ever. I'm not wrong. Ask anyone, they'll tell you. I know a lot of people are going to be upset with me for that comparison, but trust me, it's only because it's a good point. When you put the two side by side, it's no secret as to which has stood the test of time. It's easy to see why. Ocarina of Time represents a shift to a format that is still used today and is wildly successful. Just look at Breath of the Wild, right? It's clearly Ocarina of Time's spiritual successor, just a few generations removed. That's why when they did the Ocarina of Time remake, all they had to do was update the graphics for the current gen. They left the rest of the game pretty much the same, and you know you bought it because we all bought it. Egoraptor doesn't like it, but I've got a whole video coming out on why his opinion is flawed. Subscribe so you don't miss it. It's gonna be good, I think. How many of the latter Final Fantasy games felt like they took much inspiration from Final Fantasy VII? The format evolved, it had no choice. It was unpolished, unrefined, and inconvenient, and the developers realized that nobody's gonna sit through a game like this anymore. I mean, I'm sure you have fond memories of this game. We all do. But when's the last time you played it? I mean, really played it? Do you honestly feel like it aged well? Is it still that good? I wanted to find out for myself, so I had a plan to play the original start to finish before the remake launched, because I never actually played it in the 90s. I'm just as appalled as you are, trust me. Don't everybody start flaming me in the comments. Listen, if anything, I'm more qualified to criticize because I don't have nostalgia blinders on like a lot of you probably have. I never owned a PlayStation, okay? Don't judge me. You don't know my story. Anyway, I know I'm a little late, but I realized that I owe it to myself to get through this game. I don't truly deserve to experience the remake, and indeed won't even be able to fully appreciate the remake unless I experience the original for myself. It's a matter of duty and of pride. This is Upgrading Gaming. Let's do this. You know, there's a lot good about this game. Honestly, I'm not being facetious, but I think I've discovered that part of growing up is the realization that the only reason you ever beat Final Fantasy VII as a kid is because you really had nothing else to do. I'll do my best to explain it. I'm just waiting for you all to subscribe. Oh, come on, please. The game starts with an intro video that ends up with us meeting Cloud as he jumps off a train. And the first thing you'll notice as a kid playing this game in the 90s is how do you run? Barrett ran off in the direction of the background, and no matter how hard you press the directional buttons, you only walk kind of slow. Well, that's kind of annoying, but it doesn't really get a chance to be a problem yet because here comes the cavalry. This part is important because it's about to teach you the combat system. By that, I mean it just kind of drops you in and goes, have fun not dying. You know what? I appreciate this kind of education in a game. It introduces you to the combat system and how you can clearly see that it's going to be different than exploration. There's a very distinct transition. The graphics are better, the music kicks into a crazy high gear that's really catchy, so you have no problem inferring from context that some crazy shit's about to go down. As if all that wasn't stressful enough, these two dudes are shooting at you, and there's no wasted time and effort on any dumbass tutorial screens, so you either need to figure out real quick what the hell you're doing or die like a bitch. I cannot stress enough how much I love this methodology as opposed to what we have to deal with nowadays. Thrust into a world you don't understand, you have to learn on your own the skills you'll need to survive, and if you don't, you die. Anyway, back to the action. You can see there's some stuff going on the bottom of the screen here. You got your commands, a limit meter, and time? What is time?
About 5:15.
Oh, it's a wait timer? I gotta wait for my turn? Yeah, it should probably take this long. What's the matter, Cloud? You tired from beating up on the Wimp Patrol? I'm not sure what motivated the developers to do this, but what ends up happening most of the time is both sides just kind of stand there awkwardly, getting a good look at each other. They go down in one hit. Do I really need all this time to strategize? Or is it alright with you if I keep one button mashing my way to victory? Finally take out these guards and I can chase Barrett now. Still stuck in walking speed. The background in this game is always pre-rendered, which is definitely awesome and was revolutionary at the time, but it makes it kind of difficult to see where to go sometimes. Oh, okay, sweet, a locked door. Good thing that was there, or all my friends would probably be at the end of the game by now. When you finally catch them, Barrett decides it might be prudent to teach you that running can be achieved by using the directional buttons while holding circle. I guess my question is, why the hell did you wait till now to tell me? Why not tell me before when I got off the train? Why make me walk this distance at this speed when you know the secret to running in this game? It's fine, I guess it wasn't really that far, but still. I've got a good 40 hours ahead of me, so every second counts. When you finally come to the second locked door, Barrett decides that he's not going to make me chase him anymore. I guess he wants to keep tabs on me. I'm okay with that and everything, but Barrett, where you go? Okay, I guess he's just inside me now. Barrett is within me. I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't old enough in 1997 to consent either. This section is designed to teach you the party system on which the entire game will be centered. You can use your party members to support you by attacking enemies or using items, which is important because every move you make is such a commitment due to the turn-based format. Not to mention the fortnight of cooldown after each turn. After a few random encounters spent learning and growing with your new pal Barrett, who's admittedly just a bit too comfortable questing around with Cloud, a few screens later, you're planting a bomb and fighting the first boss. Hang on, what? You can miss with the Phoenix down? Is that a real thing? That can't be a thing. Yeah, that's about right. I'll take my participation award. What, no continue? Just back to the title screen? Good thing I saved. I didn't save. I thought about cutting my losses, maybe quitting while I was ahead. I said to myself, is this really worth it? Do I really have to subject myself to this jackassery? I took a breath, I had a moment of reform, I pulled up my socks, and I jumped back in, pants or no pants. There's a reason I was ultimately able to finish this game, and it really ties into the reason I think it was so important for there to be a remake at all. Let's talk about that. It's almost too simple to explain the failures of Final Fantasy VII that made it necessary to literally reimagine and redesign the entire thing essentially from scratch. It's got nothing to do with the content, because there's quite a lot in Final Fantasy VII to be excited about, and there's no way I'll ever fault a game this old for its graphics. If you boil it down to its major components, what failed to hold up was the gameplay itself. Final Fantasy VII's biggest problem is twofold: random encounters and turn-based combat. I mean, that's it. I said the whole thing already. Two little things and the entire experience is fundamentally different, right down to the difficulty progression and the way it rewards the player. The original Final Fantasy VII is a terrific example of the RPG format. It starts off reasonably simple, and as you progress, you encounter more difficult enemies with more health that can deal more damage. The reason why this is significant is because of the turn-based style of action. The enemy gets as many turns as you do to attack, so mathematically speaking, being able to deal more damage and tank more hits directly contributes to your ability to defeat enemies. The game itself is intentionally designed with this format in mind. As you advance, you can unlock additional abilities and collect weapons, both of which are usually necessary or at least helpful to dispatch more difficult enemies later in the game. RPGs in general tend to follow this format. Hit a difficult section, go back. Wander around, grind some random encounters, gain some levels, and try again, because there's really no other option than that. I hope you've got a lot of free time. Strategy is meant to be important in a game like this, but it pretty much goes right out the window when you can simply grind levels to the point where even the most powerful enemies in the game are reduced to what amounts to a minor speed bump. There are more graceful ways to make a game, sure, but it's technically not a bad format. It works for Pokemon, but I would argue it's more due to the theme of collecting and battling every kind of monster, which is much more conducive to the idea of wandering around grinding random encounters. There's no such theme to be found in Final Fantasy VII, so it just feels tedious and out of place. I mean, how long did it take you to beat when you were younger? Like 5,000 hours? You can get your master's degree in less time. This is ultimately how the original almost lost me, because I just don't have that kind of time. I know I'm not alone in this. The PlayStation Network re-release of the original had built-in assists, because even the developers knew nobody in this day and age is going to bother with the hours required for all the grinding, the traveling, and the waiting that was actually required to finish this game in 1997 when the payoff is what? Street cred? I hate myself, dude, but not that much. These assists are instrumental in making the original playable in the 21st century. Clicking the R3 button activates battle boosts, which streamlines the battle process by fast-forwarding the wait timer and limit charge, and eliminates the need for grinding and farming items by constantly replenishing your health and magic as you take damage and use spells. You're still vulnerable to one-hit KOs, so it's not really that game-breaking. Clicking R3 and L3 together completely turns off random encounters, encounters, like a max repel that never wears off, which is a godsend when you're trying to navigate the tricky puzzle sections or just trying to go from town to town. Clicking L3 by itself triple speeds the flow of the entire game, completely trivializing the act of traversing the overworld, which takes all day otherwise. I mean, look at that. Look at this gift we've been given. How'd we ever get around otherwise? I can only take it as poetic validation that the developers made the remake almost completely different from the original. They took the clunky, boring turn-based action and chucked it for a more real-time approach. These kinds of games are ultimately more satisfying to the player, in my opinion, and as a result have a respectable level of replayability. Yes, the RPG elements are still there, but it feels like more of a healthy balance because you really don't necessarily need the highest level in order to progress through the game in normal difficulty. Also, getting money is easy and items are cheap, so no grinding required. It's just so much better. It's beautiful. Cloud controls about as well as he should, swinging his sword is satisfying and feels like it has real weight, and the addition of blocking and dodging makes it so much more important for the player to actually know what they are doing. You actually feel like you are Cloud now. You know, you're not just telling him what to do anymore. Additionally, the ATB system has been totally revamped in a very encouraging way. Filling the gauge gives you access to your abilities and magic spells, and the gauge fills faster as you land attacks, incentivizing more aggressive play. No more waiting. It's so much more sophisticated than the original. It's clear the need for a remake here goes way deeper than polygons. Wedge, you okay there? Looks like your pants cut. Oh my god, your entire body's in half. For all its graphical limitations, the original has so much to offer, and it was able to do that before many of us even knew what we wanted. That's pretty special, and I think it's why our love for the game runs so deep, even though 20 years later, it's kind of hard to get through. That kind of support and adoration for a game is probably the reason so much care and effort went into the production of the remake, and I honestly can't wait to get into it and experience it for myself. This is probably a good time to leave a like. I've paid my dues, I've eaten my veggies, and now it's time for my dessert. Bring me the remake. I am so glad that I played the original first. Right from the title screen and all the way through to the end, you can clearly see every aspect of the remake is an enhancement and faithful reproduction of the original. Every corner of the environment from the original has been faithfully reproduced in the new engine. The design of the enemies is directly taken from the original and upscaled with virtually no changes. Every note in the score, every camera angle, right down to the dialogue and development of the characters, it all feels so wholesome and genuine. It truly feels like this game was made with love, and that's not something you can say for every game, let alone every remake. If you enjoyed the original, I see no reason why you wouldn't be absolutely thrilled about the attention to detail and painstaking loyalty that went into the remake. It's better than beautiful, it's perfect. Well, almost. For all of the praise that I have for this game, and there is a lot of it, I do have my bones to pick. Right after you're treated to the opening cinematic, just as with the old game, you're thrust into combat, but not with the same enthusiasm. You know what I mean? You're kind of gently placed there. I mean, the first thing it does is throw a prompt in your face. The worst kind of prompt, too. The kind that freezes the action in an action game and makes you read a wall of text to try and learn how to play it. Seems like a lot just to teach me that the square button makes Cloud swing his sword. Sekiro did the exact same shit, drives me crazy. All you need to do, if you really insist on teaching me what the square button does, is put a square button indicator literally anywhere on screen. You're just putting it in this prompt anyway. You don't have to keep breaking up the action like this. I promise you, gamers are all pretty well equipped to associate a shape on the screen with a button on the controller. I'll hit that square button, I will clearly see Cloud swing his sword, and boom, I've learned what the square button does. I'm glad we're past that. Can we move on now? Nope, damn it all. It's only frustrating because it keeps happening. You have to break up the action to teach me what ATB charges do, to teach me to block, teach me to lock on, frick, to open a chest? I can see the button prompt on the frickin' box. Listen, guys, I understand you have to teach me how to play your game, I get it, but I find it hard to believe that anyone with the mental and psychological fortitude to read your shitty prompts in the first place would have any difficulty whatsoever in figuring out what all the buttons do by simple trial and error. If you have to do it this way, do it the way you did with Final Fantasy 15. Before you start the game, it gives you the option of taking the combat tutorial. You still have to endure walls of text, but it's in a controlled environment totally separate from the flow of the actual game. You can get a feel for the controls, practice the movement and the basics of combat, and if you already know what you're doing, get this, you can skip it. That's how you do it, guys, but didn't you already know that? Does Square Enix have a totally different dev team for each title? It would explain a lot, but I guess I'm confused. Now you're breaking up the action to explain to me how to jump over stuff? You've given me an icon on the ground with an arrow on it that points in the direction that my friends just went. I think from context alone, I can figure out that somehow this arrow icon can help me leave the current area. Even if I don't figure it out right away, I'm at least curious about what's up with the little arrow on the floor, so I walk over to it and bam, I've crossed the barrier. Could have figured this out on my own, but I can't because I need to be frozen on the spot to learn this because I'm stupid as shit as far as developers are concerned, even though the only people playing these games in the first place is a subset of people that is predisposed to solving puzzles. Can I remind you again that this is an action game? Finally get through these tutorials and I get to this gate. Cool, there's a switch here with a triangle icon. I learned what to do with that back at the treasure chest. So I hit triangle and... You have to hold it? Why do you have to hold it? Is opening this door somehow a major commitment? Am I gonna want a chance to change my mind? Seriously, I can't figure this out and it comes up a lot during this game. It just feels like a waste of time. I could justify it maybe if pulling the switch took a few seconds, but the animation makes it look like he's just waiting to pull it. If there's a reason for it, it's unclear. Even if you want me to hold it for a reason, why make it take so long? This is at least 3 seconds too long for something as basic as opening a gate. I just don't get it. We're not even done with tutorials yet? Are you kidding?
Mind pushing that button?
Oh, you mean this button? What about the one right in front of you? Have you tried that one? Here's another game design faux pas. You come to this section here where you have to navigate between security lasers. I guess it's meant to teach you how to use the sprint mechanic. I can see that there are lasers here, but the game devs, in all of their wisdom, decided somehow that it would be necessary for a full cutscene to introduce the player to this section. A cutscene where Cloud literally says out loud what you have to do to complete the section.
Yeah, figure out the timing of the lasers. Then, make a move when they cycle off.
Cloud is talking to Jesse here, but this information is clearly intended for the player. It is one pronoun away from a 4th wall break, man. Jesus, how on the head does it really need to be? Guys, I can see the lasers. You give me a few seconds, I'll even be able to figure out that they're on a timer. If you really want to help me figure out that I can run in between laser timings, show me. Let me watch Jessie, she's ahead of me anyway. Let me watch her run through while the laser's off. In fact, I get to watch that happen during the cutscene, which would have been all I needed, but I've already been through an entire cutscene and a tutorial prompt to try and help me through these lasers. I guess I can give the devs the benefit of the doubt. Maybe these are like those instant death lasers, right? Maybe the punishment's just too high. Maybe I really needed to be warned.
You okay?
Yeah. Super dangerous. That's really the only problem with this game, is all the obligatory hand-holding. The original may not be as good as the remake, but the original at least understood how to respect the intelligence of the player. Here's a perfect example. Check out this one section in the original where you're trying to infiltrate the Shinra building. Up on this floor, you're meant to figure out that you can eavesdrop on the conversation in the conference room by climbing up into the vent in the bathroom. The only way you can really figure this out, if you don't already know, is by talking to people around the floor. They let on to hints that you can smell shit coming from the vent in the conference room, and using only that information and your wits, you can figure out what you're supposed to do. Uh-oh, am I stuck? Am I stuck? Is this just the game now? How do I get out of here? What does the remake do with this particular puzzle? They hand it to you, right on a platter. This guy gives you the answer immediately, almost like he's played the original before. Barrett reminds you again when you get there in case you've taken a recent blow to the head, and then to add insult to injury, the developers have the nerve to go and do this.
Something stinks.
This is nothing but a reference for fan service, and it makes me mad because if you don't know what the hell he's talking about, it makes no sense for him to say this here. In the original, he says it, sure, but only after you've had to do all this detective work to discover that the vent above the men's actually leads to above the conference room. Do you see the difference here? In 1997, you have prior knowledge of the smell that wafts into the conference room, and it's because you needed that information to progress the plot. So what Hojo says makes sense. In 2020, you are only just learning this information now, after you find out how to get into the vent. Without laying the legwork, it seems implied that Cloud is the cause of the smell in the vent, not the bathroom on the other end of it. This is one of very few instances of what I consider to be poor execution of a callback to the original, in a game where references to the original are numerous and actually well executed for the most part. Aside from a handful of missteps, I guess I really don't have to tell you what makes this game wonderful. Whether you've played the original all the way through or not, I definitely encourage you to pick it up for yourself if you haven't already. What we have here is a remake that rings true to the original in a way that remakes of the past just haven't been able to achieve. It's truly a remake worthy of the name. In spite of its flaws, I feel very lucky and honestly quite spoiled to be able to enjoy this game on a modern console. I'm just glad they were able to redeem themselves after this dumpster fire.
Oh, this calls for a song!
Thank you for watching Upgrading Gaming. Please consider subscribing, it's free. If you like this video, please check out some of my other content and I'll see you over there. Until then, be excellent to each other. Barrett, that's your gun hand? You sure you want to do that?